how often they'll send out,
Weekly.
weekly. They send at least they send out weekly emails. And I was just telling Tim, I've never read one of those that I didn't read something in there and go, dang, I learned something from that. They're well written. A, and then B, they make it very, very easy for you to let your senators and representatives know, hey, folks. And so there's a whole bunch of people that read that and let them know, and they're a very good force, and they're on our side. So I'd encourage you to give a heads up here to Tim, and then you'll hand it to Al.
I would be happy to hand it to Al, one of our board members, actually. Thanks. I won't take up too much time. I really appreciate the kind introduction. I am not a doctor, have no medical expertise. So as I was listening to the last fantastic presentation, 90% of it went over my head. There was something that I got out of that did not go over my head, and the word quackbusters came up a couple times. And that's really what I'm here to talk to plug briefly. We are a grassroots advocacy group, so we do litigation, we do lobbying, and we do education. Those are sort of the three prongs of what we do. We were founded in order to protect integrative medicine, practitioners, and access for consumers years and years ago. We have run into some issues from a public relations standpoint, search engine standpoint, and that's really my job. I'm a marketing and communications guy. We were looking for a strategy to find a way to sort of combat some of the damage that quackbusters and groups like that do in terms of online reputation. So when you're being searched for and some crazy slander comes up on the first page of Google, we're trying to figure out ways to get that off. So we came up with a concept, and I'll be around for the whole weekend. So if anybody in here are bloggers or send out newsletters, do any kind of publishing, I would love to talk to you about our network syndication program. Essentially what it is, we're creating a network that when you post content, it goes out to a broad array of websites. And what that's intended to do is to increase your search engine rankings and to start to drive. That's really the only way to fight those things, is to put positive content out there and drive it down through volume, through search volume. And so we have a program, it's called the Network Syndication Program. It's completely free. It's open to physicians who have their own blogs, websites, and do this kind of publishing. And so I would love to talk to you in more detail about it if it's something that interests you, and if you've had any of those issues, or if you haven't had those issues and just would like to reach a wider audience. Hopefully this would be of interest to some of you. So thanks, and I look forward to chatting with some of you over the weekend. And I will turn it over to a man much smarter and taller than I.
I'm not sure of the part of that. John, come on up. Hi, my name is Al Augustine, and this is John Richardson. And I'll let John introduce himself in a minute, but
Hi.
We're going to try to give you a little talk today about how to make sure you protect the office if you're doing chelation and if you're doing integrative medicine. Just a brief background, and for 5 years, many years ago, I was the chief prosecuting attorney for Illinois and put on 5 national conferences working with prosecutors for all around the country, telling them how to prosecute doctors who were doing bad. And proudly, I think I did a good job, and I never once prosecuted anybody for chelation, and not because I believed in it at that time, because I didn't know much about it, but it just seemed to me that it wasn't hurting anybody. Well, so what's the problem? I thought from a prosecuting standpoint. Since that time, I've had almost 90 chelation treatments. I have a great believer in most of the therapies that ICIM and other alternative groups work with and work on. And so what I've done for ICIM over the years, I was their general counsel for a number of years after, obviously I left the prosecutor's office many years ago. And in that capacity, I gave lectures like we're going to give today on how to stay out of trouble. It doesn't mean you're going to get in trouble, but it means just to be careful and cautious, because you have to remember that if you're doing things that are different than the mainstream medicine, different than traditional medicine, when they look at you, they're going to say, well, why isn't that doctor doing this? Or why isn't that doctor doing that? And so because of that, you have to be extra careful in how you make your records, how you keep your records, and how you transmit messages. So John and I are going to talk about that a little bit today. The one thing that I would really like to encourage you if you have a question or a comment, make it, okay? And we can talk about it, and we can have a dialogue going. If you want a lecture from us, we'll give it, but I'd prefer to have a dialogue because I think you'll learn more in that process. So I'll let John introduce himself.
I got it, I think.
Very good.
Hi, I'm John Richardson. I'm a lawyer. I started out, like Al, I was a government prosecutor. And not much different than probably a prosecutor who litigates for a medical board. Later on, I became a defense attorney, and I started doing a lot of white-collar healthcare fraud, Medicare fraud cases, and a lot of my clients, they would have licenses, and I would work hard to keep them out of prison or jail, and then at the end, they would still have a problem. Say, John, you know, there's this thing with my career. So I saw that there was a need, you know, to help the clients beyond my representation. And then some years ago, I came into the office space with Augustine, Kearns, and Levins, Al's firm, which, by the way, has probably defended more doctor's licenses than maybe any other law firm in the United States. And I started working with him and primarily his former partner, Jeff Levins, on a few cases here and there. And then I became of counsel, started working with more and more. And then when Al retired and closed the firm down, he handed the practice off to me. Obviously, I don't have half the experience with as with Al, but we've had some good results. And now I'm working with a lot of good doctors around the country. California, Texas, Indiana, Illinois, you name it. And I'm here to help in any way I can. Well,
So good. Thanks, John. As John mentioned, I retired from being a lawyer because my partner, Jeff, for 30 years died. And I just didn't have it in me to keep fighting the battles on my own. So I'm now doing some consulting. I'm still helping out people. I'm still working with people. I help John. I help other people. But anyway, let's get to today. I'm going to give you a brief outline of some of the things we're going to talk about, and then we'll start getting into those. Today we're going to talk about record keeping itself, how important it is, what we do for records. We're going to talk about informed consents, how important those are. Terry Chappell will remember when I first started working with ICIM, gosh, almost 20 years ago now, one of the things I said to them was that I think you people should really talk about doing more informed consents. And at that point, there wasn't a lot of that going on. But it seems to me that is one of the most important ways you're going to protect yourself. And as it turned out, over the numerous medical board hearings we've had over the years, it's been one of the most important things that you should know about. We're going to try to talk about some testing, what you should do with testing, how you should deal with it. We're going to try to talk a little bit about patient relationships and how you keep them going good and how you put them in the record. Some issues with employee relationships. To try to talk about something else here, about some of the challenges in testing, and then try to give you some of the things that we generally think are do's and don'ts. And those of you who have heard me talk before will know some of the do's and don'ts. One of the ways I thought I'd begin by just telling you a little story. I have a close friend of mine who was the former chief executive officer of Ritz-Carlton, and his name was Horst Schulte. And Horst has told me a number of times that over all the years and all the studies they've done at Ritz-Carlton, they came up with 4 principles that were the only principles that made people either happy or unhappy in the long run at Ritz-Carlton. That if you were happy and these 4 went well, you didn't complain. If any one of these 4 went bad, you could, if the water was dripping, you complained and complained and complained. If you were happy at the beginning with these principles, the water would drip, and you would call down and say, "Oh, pardon me, the water's dripping," and it would be no problem. And Rich said, this is the 4 things that Horst told me, and I just love the story. Number 1, what the hotel looked like when they drove in. What is its physical appearance? Number 2, how the person treated the person when they opened the door to welcome them to the hotel. Number 3, how the person at the front desk who signed them up treated them. And number 4, how the valet who walked them up to their room and helped them with their luggage treated them. Nothing else mattered. The quality of the food, etc. You can go down any number of things. And if those 4 things were correct, the guests would get along with things. And so it reminded me a little bit, so many of you in this room are going to be part of those people who are interacting with the patients. And think how important each one of you are, because you are the one that's going to help that patient have a good experience or a bad experience, because that's just how the system works with these people. So keep that in mind. Now let's talk a little bit about chelation. Many years ago, chelation was considered very, very bad, taboo, quackery, whatever you want to call it. And that's luckily not the case anymore. And it really isn't, folks. I think you can feel confident of that. The TAC trials showed without question that chelation therapy is safe. And to me, that's just without unbelievably important. It also showed that for certain people it's effective based on that limited group that they had, et cetera, et cetera. But the way people looked at chelation at the beginning, 25, 35 years ago, was that it was really close to, some people thought it was quackery. Now, I don't think you have that anymore. You still have some people who think that. They still react that way occasionally. But I can tell you that there isn't nearly the danger in doing chelation in your practice, not nearly the issue. As long as you pay attention to some of the things we're going to talk about today, because it's real important how you keep your records. It's real important how you do your testing, and then goes on from there. These kind of talks, by the way, could go on for 2 days, so we're not going to do that for you folks. But let's just make sure that we start with the concept of the medical boards, okay? Each one of you are in a state that there's a medical board there that the doctor is responsible to. And the medical boards are there to educate, and they're there to discipline, okay? And so make sure that we know that, and make sure that you understand that the medical boards, not one member of the medical board has probably ever had a chelation treatment, has ever believed in chelation, or even supports chelation. So you understand, if you get before the board, you've got an uphill discussion to have with the board about what's going on here. And so that's one of the reasons why the record keeping is so important, because what the board will ask first thing is, let us see the medical records of the patient. And if the medical records are not done well, you have a problem. And it increases. As John said, my firm has probably handled more medical board cases than anybody in the country. And I can tell you, when we had great medical records, we had great results. And when we had terrible medical records, we had pretty good results. We still did okay, but it was much harder struggle. So John, why don't you start talking about some record issues?
Okay. Just a few things. Medical records. If it's not in writing, it didn't happen. You must put this down in writing, always. And you have to remember your SOAP, subjective, objective assessment plan, always. And really, every time someone's in your office, we need to be taking their vitals. We need to be recording their vitals. This is very, very important. What else? Complaints. If something happens that's negative in your practice, you need to record it. Closing your eyes and hoping for the best is the surefire way to find yourself in front of the medical board. This also shows that if you are in front of a medical board, they review the charts, it shows them that you're honest. So it's very important. You should be constantly updating your medical records. HIPAA. This is a privacy act, and for many of you, this might not apply because you're not submitting billing to either Medicaid, Medicare, or an insurance company. However, you really should probably treat it like you are. People should be signing waivers. People, if you are going to do records that are electronic records, people should be signing off in a waiver saying that I consent to receive electronic records. Really need to be vigilant in this aspect of record keeping. Good things. Write all the good things down, especially if a patient comes in. Quote them. Put it right in their chart. You find yourself in front of a medical board, let them know, hey, this stuff works. Integrative medicine works. How do we know? Well, patient came in, says, I feel great today. This really seems to be making a difference in my life. Very important. Record the good with the bad. Also, side effects. There are side effects. We need to not close our eyes. We need to record them. We need to address them. Again, this is showing the medical board, unfortunately, if you end up in front of them, that you are being honest. You are being diligent in your record keeping. Now,
let me just add to what John had said about the record keeping, because what he said at the very beginning is exactly what the medical boards believe. If it wasn't in writing, it didn't happen. But we all know that's just absolutely ridiculous. There's many, many things that happen in a medical office, interactions between patients and doctor, discussions, other things that not everyone writes every word, every thought, everything down. What we're both trying to say is try to write down the things that are really important and try to make sure you keep that in mind and you put that down and you put it down. Now, sometimes that becomes a problem. If some of you have electronic medical records, sometimes you don't have quite the number of boxes and you have to add different things. It's important to still put that in there. The better records you can have, the better it is. I've even told people that if you get a request for medical records from an insurance company, a medical board, anybody, whoever it is, we're going to talk about one of these later on, that I think it's real important that you do a summary of the medical records before, on top of the actual medical records. So you don't pretend that summary is the medical record. You say, we're supplementing the medical record with a summary of it so that for the ease of reading and understanding. Because that way sometimes you can tell all the things that you couldn't tell or that weren't necessarily in the medical records. So record keeping is, I just can't tell you how important it is. I think some people have estimated that at least 60% of malpractice suits involve some type of medical record keeping mistake or error. The other thing that I think we should keep in mind in medical records is try to make them readable. How many times have somebody said, well, I can't read those records. Well, now think if you can't read the doctor's writing or the doctor can't read your writing, how is some third party going to be able to have any idea what's going on? That's one of the reasons you try to do a summary. So to the extent that you can make them readable, you're really safer. You're protecting yourself more. So one of the things that all the medical records should have if you're doing anything integrative alternative, as I said at the beginning, is informed consents. Now, I think you've all heard the term and understand it, but let me tell you what some of the things that informed consent should have without question in it. A brief description of the disease to be treated. Okay? What am I trying to deal with this? The explanation of what conventional treatment could be done instead of this. And why do you want that? You want that because you don't want anyone to say you coerced or you gave somebody a line of baloney or you tried to talk somebody into taking chelation or some other integrative or alternative treatment instead of a conventional treatment. Remember, chelation therapy is by and large an elective procedure, right? I mean, somebody says, this is what I want to do, and you should make sure that that's clear. A brief discussion of the presumed mechanism of action of the alternative treatment. What's happening? How does it work? Possible risks and side effects, as John said before. Possible benefits of the treatment. Statement that the patient chooses voluntarily to undergo the treatment. Terry, who was your last speaker, and I wrote an article in the 2013 May Townsend letter. You remember that, Terry? And it is entitled, How Does the Informed Consent Change Now That We Have TACT? So if you wanted to read an article that he and I wrote jointly, just about a little bit more about informed consents and how that fits in now that the TACT trial has taken place, there's a Townsend letter of May 2013 that will give you an idea of that. You also want to make sure in an informed consent that it clearly says that it is current, it is free, voluntary, and really genuine. And what is current? What do I mean by current? Let's say a person is coming into the office for 5 years for various chelation treatment or other alternative medical treatment, and it's working. And you had them assign an informed consent 5 years ago. And then something happens at the 5th year, and you don't have them sign another one. It can be a danger. So I recommend that if you have patients coming in on a regular basis, that you have them sign a new informed consent every 6 months. I don't believe you need to do it every single trip. I think that's way overdoing it. But I think you need to do it on a regular basis. I had a doctor, even like two or 3 months ago, call me, and we were talking about a problem he had. And I said, was there an informed consent in the file? And he said, yes. And I said, is it current? And he said, well, it's 7 years ago, Al. And I said, well, it's better than not having one. Don't get me wrong. It's much better than not having one. It'd be much better to have one that was 6 months ago, okay? Because you never know how things can change, how things can happen. Obviously, make sure that the person who's signing it has a mental capacity to do it. If you're dealing with a child, if you're dealing with somebody who has a disability, clearly you need a guardian or a parent to get involved, okay, in signing informed consents and things like that. And I can tell you from personal experience and really harsh experience to a couple of my medical doctor clients, that if you have an autistic child or that kind of issue, really try to get both parents to sign the informed consent. Much, much safer that way. Because as we know, sadly, the statistics are about 3/4 of parents that have autistic children get divorced. And then fights and battles start about what kind of treatment can take place. And one or the other is saying, no, I don't know. Now, typically the mother is taking the child into the doctor, but then the father says, wait a minute, I don't want that kind of treatment. I want something else. And usually because I don't want to pay for that. And I got insurance over here that it might not do any good, but the insurance will cover it. If you have both parents, you're better off, way better off. And if the father or mother really adamantly disagrees, then I think you as a doctor or as a staff have to say, do we really want to take this patient? Is it worth the risk to us, to the battle that could take place, potentially? I have one doctor friend of mine who has an office in California and in Florida who calls me every single time there was an issue like that. And then he and I go through what legal papers we have, what they don't have, how serious the patient is, and then he has to make the decision, of course. I can just say to him, and I never tell him, don't take this patient or do, because I don't think that's my role. My role is to listen to him and talk and ask questions and then try to work through the process. And does he want to take this risk or not? Remember, you don't have to take every patient that walks in the door. There's no requirement of that. You are required to treat the patient after you take them, though, until you go through some sort of end process. So keep that in mind. So that's a couple of thoughts. John?
No, I didn't like that one. All right. I want to talk about patient relationship and employee relationships. Probably the easiest way to find yourself staring down the barrel of a medical board complaint will be to neglect your patient relationships and neglect the relationships with your staff members and fellow employees. Has anybody here ever had a family member who was dissatisfied with medical care? Raise your hand. Okay. Who out of those people that raise their hand, does anybody feel brave enough to come up and help me out? If you don't, I will pick on you and make you. Anybody? What? It'll be fun. You raise your hand. Come on. What's your name? Samantha, come on up. Everybody give Samantha a hand for being brave. Okay. I need one more volunteer. What about this young lady with the sunglasses on her head? No? Anyone else that might want to help? It will be painless, I promise. Okay, come on up. And you are? Sandra? Okay. Sandra, and what was your name? Oh, that's easy. Okay. Give Sandra a hand as well. Okay. Real quick. All right. All right, Sandra, where do you work? Oh, Samantha. Samantha, where do you work?
The Institute for Endocrinology and Preventive Medicine in Dallas.
Okay. And you had a family member, and they were unhappy with their health care. Okay. Do you feel brave enough to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. It was, my mom had surgery. I mean, it was while she was in the hospital, but my mom had surgery to remove a goiter. And the surgeon was very concerned about how his scar was going to look afterwards, but not as concerned about the fact that every time my mother got out of bed to go to the bathroom, that her oxygen levels dropped into the 70s. And fortunately, I was, I'm in the medical field, and so I said that was not acceptable. And I continued to push, and come to find out they basically overloaded her with fluids, and she had a lot of fluid on her lungs, and she ended up going home on oxygen and Lasix and such, but we were not happy until it was finally corrected, because they spent days and days with her just continuing at that pace. So.
And what's Mom's first name?
Leah.
Leah. Okay. Can you do me a favor? And we're going to recreate a scene in a doctor's office, and I want you to be Leah. Is that okay? Okay?
I'm pretty much her.
All right. And Leah, how old are you?
62.
Okay. And why are you here at the office today? What's your medical condition?
Is it after the surgery?
No, we'll do before.
Oh, okay. I was diagnosed with a goiter.
Okay. And you're here to see Dr. Smith about a possible surgery.
Yes.
Are you nervous?
Yes.
Okay. Leah, I want you to have a seat in the waiting room. Okay? Can you come here? You're Sandra, right? Sandra, I want you to... And what do you do, Sandra?
I am a nurse practitioner. I work with Dr. Hickey.
Here, turn around to the viewing audience here. Okay, you're a nurse practitioner?
Yes.
Okay, today I want you to be to work at the front. I want you to be at reception. Can you do that, Sandra?
Yeah.
Okay. And essentially, hold on one second. Okay, so what Sandra's going to do is Leah's going to come in. She's going to sign in, give her name, and then Sandra's going to call her. And I'm going to be the physician, Dr. Smith. Okay? So, do you understand, Leah? Okay. All right. And we're going to just do this kind of like we're doing a little TV show. And I'm just going to say, action. Okay, ladies? Okay, Leah. Come on into the doctor's office.
Hi, Jenny. How are you doing today?
I'm doing okay, but my name's Leah.
Well, Jenny, can you have a seat and we'll call you back soon?
I can, but my name's Leah.
Well, Jenny, just take this paperwork and have a seat and we'll be with you shortly.
I think I may find a doctor who will remember my name.
All right. Okay. And then we're going to go ahead and call Leah back up.
Jenny, can the doctor can see you now? Is Jenny here?
Okay, you can call her.
Leah?
All right. So, and then Leah comes to run back to see the doctor. And come on back, Leah. Okay, you're Jenny Anderson. Oh, okay. So, why are you here?
I was diagnosed with a goiter and was told I need surgery.
Okay, Jenny. So we're going to schedule.
Are you sure you have the right chart? My name is Leah.
Oh yeah. So no, what we're gonna do is we're gonna fix you up. We're gonna have surgery. There's nothing to worry about. And if you have any problems, you can call me. I want you to get with my staff. We're gonna do some testing, and then we'll schedule the surgery. All right.
Okay.
All right. So Leah. All right, and C. Leah, and obviously that was completely ridiculous, but you lived this unhappy experience with your mom. You love your mom, right?
Yes.
But in this moment, I can kind of see or feel the tension in your mind and in your body. You didn't like this woman, Sandra, treating your mom that way, treating you that way, did you?
No.
How did it feel?
It feels like the office doesn't care and they may make a mistake.
And how does that make you feel, Leah?
Angry.
Scared. Okay. And if there is a problem, Leah, even if it might be a very little one, how soon or quick would you be able to react having had this experience first?
Well, I would probably react very quickly with any other problem because I already have a bad taste in my mouth for the office.
Right. Exactly. But any little problem you have in your office can be magnified. And I know that was kind of a roundabout way of explaining that you really, really, really need to have good patient relationships. But you need to kind of think of it. It's real life situation. I mean, it happened to Samantha and her mother. And if you have good patient relationships, when things do go wrong, and we're all human beings, everybody makes mistakes. No matter how good a physician you are, no matter how good a medical provider you are, everybody makes mistakes, and you have a long career, they're going to happen. But if you have a close relationship, you're respectful, you know the patients by their name, by their first name, and you know their family members, and you ask the family members how they're feeling, how they're doing, and you treat them like a neighbor, like a friend, and not like a number on a chart, it makes a difference. Again, most people find themselves in front of a medical board because of a jilted patient or a jilted employee. And it may be as simple as calling someone Jenny and not Leah, because it made you feel defensive. It made you feel scared. Right? Okay, thank you. All right, have a seat. Thank you very much. Real quick. Problems. You must deal with problems immediately, as soon as they come up. You cannot close your eyes to problems. If you feel like there's something, you find yourself in a situation, you need to call an attorney. I'm not trying to sell myself, but you need to have someone you can go to who you can bounce things off of. Okay? Other issues with patient relationships. Refunds. I can't sit here and tell you to refund or not to refund. That's me telling you what to do with your personal finances. But the issue and the way you must frame it is this worth it? If this goes south, is this amount of money worth having to pay a lawyer, having to potentially stare down the mental anguish and aggravation of finding yourself in front of a medical board. So these are things you need to consider. I'm not telling you to refund as soon as somebody comes in and makes a complaint, but I'm telling you to think of these things in these terms. Employee relationships. Where are we on time? Does anybody know? Okay. All right. All right. Is anybody here a staff member, whether it be nurse practitioner, a PA, or any kind of medical staff here? Raise your hand. Has anybody else? Out of you, the people that raise your hand, has anybody found themselves in the situation in your employment or your job where you were asked to do something and you don't feel like you've been given the adequate amount of training? No one? Everybody has perfect employers here. All right, we can all go home. All right. I think that y'all don't want me to pick on you, but what I'm trying to say is that this is really important too. A lot of complaints come from former employees who, for one reason or the other, find themselves out of work and they want to get even. We're going to talk about the False Claims Act in the next hour. I'm sure you've heard something called whistleblower. A lot of that deals with those physicians who do have to report to Medicaid, Medicare, or have insurance claims. In those type of offices, it's even more important that you have good relations with your employees, because if they find themselves terminated, they're out to lunch with their friends, and they find out that they can receive up to 25% of what the government collects on a whistleblower case. Suddenly, they are financially incentivized to come at you and come against you. So it is important to have a good relationship with your patients, or your employees. So I'll talk a little bit about delegation. Make sure the people that you're asking to do something, make sure that they're capable to carry that task out. Don't ask somebody on the first day, hey, Sally Smith's here, go ahead and let's just do chelation and walk out the door. I'm being emphatic, but you need to make sure they're adequately trained and that they're competent enough to do what you're asking them to do. Not only that, once you've asked them to do something, you need to follow up. Confirm with these people. Now, did you do A? Did you do B? And did you do C? Don't just assume that it's done correctly. Okay, you need to confirm with these people, if you are delegating responsibility, that things were done correctly. You need to make sure your employees are adequately supported. You need to make sure that they're adequately supervised. In this little vignette here, obviously, Sandra was not adequately supported or supervised, or else that would have never happened. No one would have called a patient by a wrong name 3 times in a row if they're adequately supervised. You need to have, you need to think of it as your family away from home. You need to make sure that everyone is supported and supervised. Okay, Mal?
Well, that was fun. Let me make a couple of comments on that. I'm on the board of a hospital that the policy we use is the mother standard of care. And I thought it was a great example with Leah being the mother. Because if you really think of trying to treat your patients as you would want your mother to be treated, it's a real easy way to carry out the day and treat every one of them with respect and kindness. And even though some of them are in a bad mood, and some of them are sick and grouchy, and they're hard to be real nice to, but the better relationships you have, as John said, it's just better all around. The other thing I wanted to add to what he said, if you decide to give a refund to a patient because it's just not worth the trouble, and it's a small amount of money or whatever it is, I have recommended repeatedly that no refund be given without a release. And that's a legal document that says, basically, doctor, you didn't do anything wrong. The doctor is giving the money back voluntarily. I try to add in that I, the patient, have not reported this matter to any governmental entity, insurance company, or anything else, just to try to get away from that kind of baloney. I actually had one woman one time about 4 years ago who said, I'm not going to sign that document and get my $2,000 back because I already reported them to the medical board. And I said to the doctor, what's the point? We're going to have to deal with the medical board. Why give her the money back? I mean, that makes no sense at that point. And it all worked out, but we didn't give her the money back. I told you we talk about testing, and this is one of the areas that I've had, we've had issues before boards a number of different times. In the alternative medical world, there's testing done that is not standard or traditional or whatever you want to call it testing. Everything from computerized things like ACIRA testing to electroacupuncture of Vol testing to provoked urine testing to just various tests that are done that many people find, many good doctor practitioners find very helpful in trying to help their patients and very helpful in a real way, but they're not viewed by the traditional medical world as meaningful tests. Okay, so how do we get around that? Because if the doctors find that they're helpful in treating a patient, I support 100% that test being taken. Okay, I think all of us would if it's going to help us get better. The thing to be careful of is not base the diagnosis solely on that sort of non-traditional testing for the taste, lack of just using another term, on that the test that the medical community doesn't use a lot. Here's what you do. To me, it's pretty simple. You take that test, whether it's, I've dealt with cases dealing with electroacupuncture of Vol. It's a computerized mechanism studying the various points in your body to see if there's any aberrations in that point in your body. You take that test, you take the patient's history, you take their physical, you do everything, and then the doctor makes a clinical diagnosis or trying to rule out what could possibly be the problem and how can I possibly deal with this problem. So in other words, you don't have this strange quotes around it test being the sole reason why you give this remedy or treatment. It's the doctor's clinical diagnosis of the whole patient. Are you with me? Does that make sense? In other words, you just don't take test, give the treatment. You put other things in between there to really make it appear and in real life be that we're trying to help this patient get healthy. And we're not using hocus pocus to sell XYZ product. So I think I've had a couple of cases where the testing alone became a major issue, and we had to deal with them because the doctor would take the test and give the patient XYZ. And there's nothing in the record to show anything other than test XYZ. And we dealt with it, but it took a lot of work. Make sure you keep all your lab tests up to date. Make sure that when you do take tests, you get the results back. I mean, you have no idea how the number of times I've seen doctors' records. I ordered this test. What happened? Oh, I guess we never got it. Well, if you order it, get it. And make sure you analyze it and make sure that it's part of the record. If there's tests and laboratory results from a prior doctor, I'll get one side. For a prior doctor, try to get those. Yes, sir. Absolutely correct. You cannot make them do a test, okay? If you say, I recommend you take this test, and they say, I don't want to, I would actually have them sign saying, I don't wish to take the test. And then you're done. That part of the equation is done with, because you can't force them, because maybe they don't want to take it because it's too expensive. Maybe it's too far for them to go away. Maybe it's too intrusive to them in terms of their political or social or religious beliefs. Or maybe they just got lazy.
And make sure you put it in the chart. They refuse to do it. Record it.
But you don't have to. You don't have to make them. No, that's absolutely not. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying if you recommend a test, they take it. Make sure the record reflects that you got the results and you looked at it. That's what I'm saying. Any other questions on that? See what else I had. I think that's what some of the main things we wanted to talk about. I think you wanted to talk about some others, the do's and don'ts and stuff like that.
Yeah, just a little bit. I also wanted to mention competency. Don't do anything that's outside your wheelhouse. I mean, this is obviously people are here. This is integrative medicine. People are here because they're passionate about what they do and passionate about helping people. But if you have to have a bat phone in your office on speed dial and call Terry Chappell about a procedure, you don't need to be doing that procedure. You have to do with what's in your wheelhouse. That's another way that people find themselves in trouble. And I can't, and you have to be the judge of that. Good practices. Keep great records. Keep great records. Keep great records. We've talked about what that means. Keep your patients happy. Again, you don't have to be their mother, but it matters. I love the example about the Ritz-Carlton and how people feel when they walk in there. Keep your patients happy. Keep your employees happy. Mistakes. You need to deal with the mistakes as they're happening. Do not close your eyes and hope that things don't blow up in your face. Don't be hesitant to contact an attorney. Okay? If someone calls me initially with a problem, that initial consultation is 100% free. Don't let things fester. Be familiar with your local laws, okay? Be familiar with your local laws and what is required of you. Ignorance of the law is absolutely not an excuse. It's not. I've heard that said at informal hearings time and time again with medical boards. If you do find yourself confronted with a government agency, have a procedure plan in place. Okay? If a medical board investigator comes into your office and you're not there and it's only a receptionist that's there and they say, hey, here's my badge. I want 5 charts. You don't want 5 hours later, oh, by the way, doctor, I gave 5 charts to Investigator Smith because I had to. No. The only time you have to comply immediately with the government, and Al would tell you the same thing, is if there is a search warrant. Okay? If somebody comes in with a subpoena, if somebody serves you with a complaint demanding documents, this is not something you have to deal with immediately. The only time you have to deal with or comply immediately is if a search warrant is being served on you, and trust me, if a search warrant is being served on you, there'll be 10 to 15 cops at your front door with the search warrant, and you'll know that this is something you have to immediately take care of. Otherwise, you contact your attorney. And it's not sufficient enough that you know this. Again, make sure your staff is supported. Everybody should know this. The receptionist up front should have, if you're not in the office, a way to get a hold of you and a way to get a hold of your attorney. To where if somebody does come in the office, they know what to say. And what they know what to say is, I'm sorry, my attorney has instructed me not to talk about that or not to comply unless he's contacted first. No, you have to comply now. My attorney has advised me I do not have to comply and I must contact him first. No, you have to comply now. My attorney has advised me. Okay? Everybody in that office should have a script. And they should have a telephone number. Yes, sir. Let me come on. Let me please fill out of you. Okay.
I had a conversation with my staff, and at one of our Monday morning meetings,
I'll come over.
everybody really needs to write this down. And I just found it on my phone on YouTube. Never talk to the police. Google that or go to YouTube and watch it. Never talk to the police. That's what he has said but not said. And I think if the cops do come in, the medical board investigator, they're not friendly. That's the police. Don't talk to them. And none of your staff should talk to them. It should be, and I think the first words out of your mouth are, I want to cooperate with you fully, but I must contact my attorney first. But watch that YouTube. Never talk to the police. And there's one on there where there's an attorney that got into a situation, and he thought because he was attorney, he could handle it, and he put himself on the gallows basically. Right. And so even if a lawyer meets the police, he doesn't talk to them. The Miranda rights. You have a right to remain silent. And another phrase in there, anything you say can and will be used against you. So don't talk to them. Unfortunately, you've got to pull out your checkbook and call a lawyer.
Right. I would agree with that. My 8 and 7 and 4-year-old know that right now. And it's sad, but I used to carry a badge. And you couldn't be more correct. That law enforcement officer's job is not, they say it's to protect and serve, okay? But their job is to build their case. That is it. Build their case. And they don't care that you have to feed your family. They don't care that you work hard to help people. They don't care about anything but building their case. And I'm not here to try to scare the heck out of anybody, but those are good. It's an important thing to remember. I think I'm going to turn it back over to Al.
All righty, well, we're getting there. Just a few more things to think about and make do's and don'ts. But I do second what John had said, first of all, about making sure there's an office procedure in place. It's very simple for the office manager or the doctor or whoever it is to put a procedure in place. If somebody from a medical board, a governmental agency, OSHA, whoever it may be, here's the procedure we do. Here's what we do. We call this person, or we do this, we do this. I can't tell you, I've seen about 4 cases that would happen exactly what John said. The doctor was out to lunch, the medical board investigator came in, the receptionist said, "Oh, I'm supposed to give you those charts." She went and copied them, handed the charts. They're off to the medical board. Doctor comes back, he's working. She tells him 3 or 4 hours later, "Oh, by the way, I gave 5 charts to the medical board." And you can imagine how, oh my gosh, it's so simple to avoid that. Just have a procedure in place. Another thing that with people in this medical world, I've said this many, many times, Terry's heard me say it, don't think you're pure of heart and therefore all is good in your world, okay? Even though you are doing correct medicine, you are doing good medicine, you can't assume that just because you're pure of heart that everything's going to be okay. I'll give you an example. We had a doctor who from Tennessee a number of years ago who had a medical investigator show up on a very, very minor little issue. It's so minor, all these years later, I don't even remember what it was. It was nothing. But he said, while you're here, would you like to see my office? And I'll show you all the good work I'm doing around my office. So he showed him, well, here's the patients who are getting chelation therapy. And the investigator started snapping pictures. And here's where we're doing where we're doing hydrogen peroxide therapy. Snap more pictures, et cetera, et cetera. And he was so proud of the good work he was doing that he almost ruined his life. I mean, it's that serious. So be smart. In other words, be smart. Don't be so pure of heart. As John said earlier, don't ignore patient issues. Don't ignore other problems in the office. Deal with them. Don't think they'll go away just because somebody's having a bad day. Try to deal with them. If somebody needs to leave the office, if you need to terminate the person, to the extent that you can do a pleasant exit interview, get them to not hate you in a professional manner, you're better off. I had a case up in Wisconsin about 3 years ago where a doctor had to fire a lady because of whatever reason. She went to the medical board and filed a complaint saying that place is a pigsty and there are germs everywhere and it's unhealthy. Well, all of a sudden, medical board starts an investigation, and this went on for like 3 years because it started expanding, and they found out he did alternative medical work, and maybe we should look at some of the Lyme patients that he had, and how is he treating Lyme disease, and it all happened because she was upset with the doctor, and he could have treated it better, and he knew that. He knew that he had just said, well, you're fired, get out of here. And just be smart. I mean, if people have to go on, treat them like people, and no reason sort of to burn the bridges if you don't have to. Once again, I said earlier, try to write records to the extent you can read them. It's better to read than not be able to be read. And once again, John said take vitals, and I just wanted to, I think I've told this story a number of times, but it's worth telling again because I had a doctor in Texas years ago who was treating this one patient, and he had given this patient like 40 chelation treatments. The patient came in on a Friday. He gave them another chelation treatment, no vitals, no anything. The patient walked out 2 days later, had a heart attack. And the medical coroner said, well, it must have been this chelation treatment that caused the heart attack because that's the last intervention he had of any kind. And if the doctor had vital signs showing the patient was in good health at that time, that everything was okay, there would not have been nearly the problem. But there weren't any signs. They just walked in the door, started the chelation, and walked out. Another thing we talk about while I'm speaking about walking out, there's a question that we ask often of, can a doctor leave the facility while chelation is going on with patients? Can they go to lunch? Can they go out to the golf course or out to on their sailboat or whatever they want to do? Yes, they can, but it's not a good practice. It's not a good practice at all if you've got people under an IV there. But if the doctor does have to go to lunch, make sure the doctor is within phone contact and can get back to the office relatively quickly, or somebody with a medical, just in case something happens. So that's the kind of stuff we wanted to talk about today. And Terry? Yes.
Take it back.
I usually will say, that's fine, I'll be happy to give you your refund, and this means that you're dismissed as a patient, that because you violated the rule that we had for agreement, And usually that works out really well because it's the patient that takes the responsibility for the problem. Now that's just if something went wrong that I didn't feel was justified, the complaint was justified.
So, I think that it's important for you folks to know somebody like John or have somebody like John at their phone number. I mean, I no longer practice law, but he does. But you should have somebody that you can call if somebody's there. I'll tell you.
However, we also share office space, and I consult with Al pretty much on every case I have too. So
I'll tell you an old story from, gosh, about 35 years ago. I had a friend who was a doctor in Florida, and he had the medical board contact him, and he went and contacted his real estate attorney and said, "Can you take care of my medical board problem?" And the guy said, "Absolutely, I can." And the doctor got his license revoked about a year later. And then after the hearing, he contacted me and somehow found me. And we started looking at it, and it was such a disaster, the record. The guy didn't know what he was doing. He did everything wrong that you could possibly do wrong. We ended up actually taking it to the Florida Supreme Court, and we lost 4-3, but because it was such a bad record. So make sure that if you have a problem, if you have a question, you're in the medical world, have somebody who understands a little bit about medical legal to help guide you through if you have a problem. You may never have a problem. And the only reason for these kind of meetings is to talk in case there is. Because in my experience, you're so much safer doing chelation now than you were 25, 30 years ago. And I mean, I really believe that. But in case you do, you have some things to think about and work through. And hopefully we helped you a little bit today.
Yes. We can turn mine off.
The question is, do we have any advice on if you discharge a patient from the practice? And yes, I have very specific advice. The first thing you do is you have to know the law in your state, because each state has their own laws, but the laws generally are something to this extent. You must give the patient a letter in writing saying they are being discharged. You should give them the name of 2 or 3 doctors that might be able to help them, to replace them. That you cannot discharge a patient if they're in an emergent situation, if there's a crisis going on in their lives. You can't do that at that point. But the laws are somewhat in that, all about that area. But you can discharge any patient you want. You just have to do it a specific way. And it almost always requires a letter, a period of notice time, 30 days or 60 days, and then giving them the name of somebody else to go to.
And I would add that if you're going to give them names, you give them several names, you give them at least one traditional doctor and give them options. Fine, you can refer them on to another integrative medicine doctor, but you should also give them a traditional doctor referral. Yes, absolutely.
100%.
Absolutely.
It's the patient's records. Okay, remember, it's always the patient's records. And you have a right to charge the patient for your making copies of those records. And you have to charge a reasonable charge. And some states put a maximum how much you can charge, like 10 cents or 15 cents per fax page or something like that. But it is their records, and they have a right to those records. And I've seen doctors' licenses be complaints filed against doctors because they didn't give the patient their records, and I've seen them complaints filed because they didn't do it fast enough. There's the laws in the state usually say something like you can't charge more than X, and you have to do it within 15, 30 days or some sort of reasonable time frame. But the patients, anytime, it's their records. Yes, ma'am. Oh, no, you don't have to give them the original. You keep the original. No, absolutely. The only one, some medical boards, if you get into them, will demand the original. And in that case, you got to keep the copy. But the patient, no, you just make a copy for the patient. Alrighty? Well, I think then we're done with this part of the program. Oh, hold on, one more. Well, it's a great question. It's not just Colorado, but there are a number of states that are looking heavily and hard at opioid use and abuse and overuse and all of those kind of issues. In it's a tough one. I mean, you as the doctor have to make a decision on what you're doing, is whether it's right for the patient or not. But you know that they don't want you to be putting a patient on these things long term, unless you can show that you've tried to occasionally wean them off and then bring them back up. You know, there's a procedure for doing all of that, as I'm sure you know. But I'll give you a perfect example of a case I had. This is a great case. I'm glad you brought this up, just so I can tell this stupid story. I got a call because this doctor he was an 82-year-old, 83-year-old doctor who had been treating this 89-year-old woman with heavy morphine and opioids for 40 years. And the medical board said, you can't do that. And he wasn't even practicing anymore. He was taking it to her house in a little bag and giving it to her, and she would give him $5. And it was the most horrible thing. The board said, and so I said, well, let me find out, because, you know, obviously our job as a lawyer, what's going on here? What are the real facts? These are the real facts. When she was 28, she got third-degree burns over her whole body. She was in incessant pain her whole life. The only thing that allowed her to get up in the morning was to take some pain pills, so she went on. At 89 years old, she was still working. She was not on welfare. She was not on unemployment. She still carried on a job. She only had about 3 teeth at this point in her life and all that. And so the board said, we're gonna terminate you, doctor. I said, let's go to a hearing. And we went to a hearing, and I brought the doctor in, and they asked him questions, and he told. And I said, I have one more witness. I'm bringing her in. And she came in, and she was just a wonderful person. She was so proud, so strong. And she looked at them and said, I could not have moved an inch in my life without these. This doctor, even though he had retired, kept taking care of me because he cared for me. And she went on and on and on. And then the prosecutor looks at her in brilliant cross-examination, says, ma'am, I know Mr. Augustine. What did he tell you to say here today? Well, she had been prepared for that by Mr. Augustine. I said, he told me to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God. So, it was a wonderful setup.
I would add, I think that's a great question. It is an epidemic, opioids and drug seekers. I would just be mindful of drug seekers and take good patient history. If you have a new patient that comes in, if they saw 3 doctors before you in a 3-month span, they're doctor shopping. Be mindful of doctor shopper. Be mindful of drug seekers, because it is an epidemic, and a lot of times that the way that you get jammed up, or who you get jammed up by, is that would often not be the medical board initially. You know, this epidemic started in the streets with narcotics cops busting people. Where did you get this? I got this at the doctor's office. And these narcotics detectives, they wanted the big fish, so they went after the doctors. And so you have to be mindful of that. And, you know, just if you have a patient that's been with you for 20 years, you know them, okay? But be mindful of new patients. Take very, very good patient history. Find out who their previous physicians were, and you need to ask the tough questions. It couldn't hurt if you are suspected. If they want a particular medication, have blood screen, take their levels, see what they're on. It couldn't hurt. Yes.
Most of you may know a lot of the states are on a system where you can find out where they've gotten who and where they got their last prescriptions, and if you don't have that in your chart, you're dangling in the wind. And so and even the long-term patients, one of my opioid folks said never trust an addict, and so even the long-termers will flip on you. All of a sudden they get to like it. So checking all of our schedule, whatever gets reported to the mothership, it all goes into the DEA. And so you cannot write a secret script And if it gets filled, it goes in. They've got it. It's tabulated, so you can. I don't know. I can't remember the abbreviation for what it is, the drug screen awareness or whatever. But I mean, I get stuff about in Georgia here. I get from Michigan. If someone's been doctor shopping from Georgia to Michigan, it's on there. But it's very useful, and we need to have it.
Yes, I'll have the web. You know what? I don't have the website off the top of my head. It evades me at the time, but I'll get that for you and have that available for you. Does anybody have any other questions? Okay. Thank you so much.
Chuck?
I have a business card. Somebody just asked me for my number. I have a 800 number. It's 888-949-5245. And I'll have Wendy send out my information to you all as well. But I have a bunch of business cards if you would like. Okay.
Okay, and if you just need any help from me ever, my number is 312-543-2555. So we're going to let the good Dr. Adams start this next process, okay?
Let me tell you a story that you don't know about. I've treated some patients with buprenorphine, Subutex, Suboxone. I don't know if you're familiar with it or not. And I treated them had some patients there for a while. It had been almost a year since I written a prescription for buprenorphine. And one fine day, my practice manager came back with this panic-stricken look on her face, said, the DEA's out there. And I said, call Mel. And that would be Mel Goldstein, an attorney of mine, unfortunately, here in Atlanta. He's a good guy, but you don't. And it was really funny. There were two people, a lady and a young man. And the lady was probably in her 50s or 60s, and the young man evidently was there to learn. And she was an absolute jackass. I mean, unprofessional, demanding. I mean, I want Dr. Adams and I want him right now, And like, well, we would like to comply, but first we've got to talk with our attorney. Well, you get him in here right now. Okay, he's in Atlanta. I'm sure he'll get here as quickly as, and that really ticked her off. That's 2 hours away, But I mean, we were telling the truth, and we were polite. We were polite. We were professional. The young guy kind of acted like, oh gosh, and so nothing came. It was one of the silliest things. They wanted to know about how many patients I had, and it crossed my mind to call the police on them, because it said, you're the DEA, you're supposed to know that, and you're asking me that question. You got to be faking. I'm going to call the police on you right now. You better. I said, well, I better not do that. It might go bad. But so nothing came of it. But that was, luckily we did the right things and said, hey, we want to cooperate, but we got to get our attorney, and so it all settled out. But and this time, instead of, I've had interactions with the medical boards because of the chelation, the integrative medicine. And this time I got a really neat new one. Got a letter right at the end of March last year from the Northern District of the Department of Justice in the state of Georgia. And they had questions about my billing and the diagnoses. In other words, we think you're being fraudulent there, doctor. And so this kind of aggravated me, because I've changed over to a concierge practice. We have not billed insurance since we bailed out of Medicare October 1st of 2015, because I saw the electronic records coming, and then the new ICD-10, and I said, that's just 65,000 different ways to slow down payment. I don't want to play this game, and so I got out. And I thought everything was, pretty good. Now, I'm blessed with one thing, and that is I've got one of the best practice managers a practice could have. And this isn't my opinion. It's from, my accountant, they've got a large firm, and they have a lot of medical practices, and that's their assessment that she's one of the best in our city. she's OCD, and she does a great job of what she does. And so I know that all of our billing is tight as a brick. She managed an infectious disease practice in Atlanta. She managed a oncology practice in Atlanta, and so she knows what she's doing. And so we get this letter from the Department of Justice, and I'm like, what? You know, you got to be kidding me. And